What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Well-Rounded Individual. I am your host, Adam Schindler. If you guys are watching this, please do me a favor, click like or subscribe on that button below. It helps me grow the show and helps me bring more value to you watchers and listeners each and every week. I've got another great guest this week. He is the most educated and qualified guest that I've ever had. He has been a licensed medical doctor for the last 30 years. He is an Army veteran, and he is an entrepreneur and business owner of multiple businesses he's had throughout the years. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Chuck Mitchell to Well-Rounded Individual. Thank you for being here, sir.
How are you today?
I'm excellent. I'm excellent. I think we had a little bit of audio there, but no worries. Just welcome to Well-Rounded Individual. Thank you for taking the time to be here. And I'm excited to get into this with you and just, ask you some questions and just have a conversation with you. And, I know you got a ton of value to provide because every time I talk to you, I come away a little bit smarter.
Well, thank you. That's a nice compliment.
So let's kind of start off. I always ask everyone the same question. The first question of the interview is always about the name of the show, Well-Rounded Individual. And I always ask each guest, what does that mean to you? What are some attributes that you would associate with a well-rounded individual? What are some characteristics?
I don't know where I would start. I think being well informed, being honest with yourself, trying to be honest with people around you, uh, dealing with people fairly as you would want to be dealt with, um, trying to improve yourself from either a knowledge standpoint or just a uh, ability to interact with others, maybe, in a charitable organization or or even in your family, trying to support individuals around you that need the support. Um, it's multifaceted. It's hard to say what's well-rounded, and I don't think you ever get done, smoothing off those rough edges
Mm-hmm.
of the things about yourself that you find that you're like, ooh, didn't know that still bothered me.
Yeah, that's funny. And yeah, it's a never-ending process. When you think you're done, all of a sudden you got some rough edges again. I like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wayne Dyer, I don't know if you've read any of
Hmm.
Dr. Dyer's stuff, but
Love
he's
him.
talked about it's about striving and not arriving.
Mm.
Um, and that's a good way of looking at it. I don't know if we ever get done.
Yeah, I love that. Striving, not arriving. That I'm going to use that now anytime I want to impress somebody.
Well, remember, it's not mine, it's Dr. Dyer's.
Striving, not arriving. It also that kind of like I think is like a simile in ways to uh, the happiness of pursuit rather than the pursuit of happiness.
Right, right.
As humans, once we get to the destination, it's always kind of like what's next, but it's the journey along the way, and the things that we're overcoming and the strife we encounter and the obstacles that we encounter that really bring the true value to our lives and to the experience.
And certainly time in all those cases allows us to have perspective about what they really meant, because
Right.
there's so many things in my life, and I'm sure just as in your life, you don't gain the perspective of it and what the value of it was until years.
Are you there?
We drop signal.
Yeah. Just real quick, you're saying you don't gain value of it and perspective it until years later.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and then you wonder how in the world you ever missed it,
Right.
because it's so obvious to you in that moment.
Oh my gosh, I can like literally just think of like a handful of things already of like now looking back on it, being like, I cannot believe that I saw this in this light at this time, and just having it's amazing what a different perspective you achieve just from like having a different altitude, right? And
Yes.
that's what Jocko Willink talks about a lot. It was like, you know, Jocko, he was like a Navy SEAL, like commander. So he talks about like, you know, when he's like talking to, you know, his troops and everyone that like that's within, you know, his command and how they're operating like on the field of play. But he is like at this elevated state where he can see at a different perspective than everyone else. And he's like, it's amazing, like the difference and the decision making changes that you can have just by like having a few feet of elevation and just a slightly different perspective. And I think that's really translatable to almost anything in life.
Oh, absolutely. We as we as humans, part of our personality makeup, we're really good about building boxes and getting inside of them, and wonder how we got caught, and don't realize we create a box.
Right? You
If
built
you
your
can
own
realize
box.
that you made the box,
Yeah,
if you
you
can realize you made the box, you can realize you can make a door in your box
right,
and
exactly.
move it.
Yeah, you're the one who created it, so you can also, you know, make the escape route.
Now, I used to tell patients that were lifelong smokers of cigarettes, you weren't born knowing how to smoke. You taught yourself how to. And if you had the ability to teach yourself, you have the ability to teach yourself not to. Um, and they would look at me like I was crazy, of course. Anyway,
Yeah,
it
I'm
was a simple truth, and hopefully it would ring in their head, and at some point it would have an impact.
right. And you know, I'm sure on someone it did. You know, probably the vast majority of you did look at you crazy, but there had to have been at least one that walked away from that, maybe thinking you were crazy at first, but then like let it marinate a little bit and was like, oh, you know what? There's a point to this. He's got a really good point here.
Yeah.
You know, some people pick it
Well,
up.
like you say, consistency.
Mhm.
Consistency is the key to a lot of things.
Oh, with everything, really, right? Um,
Yeah.
cool. So let's talk about just like, you know, I'm curious because you grew up in West Virginia and
Yes.
um, then you went to the Army afterwards, and you were active duty in the Army and you were a medic in the Army, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So was being a medic in the Army kind of what like motivated you and prompted you to go the medical route, like pre-med afterwards? Or is that something you kind of always knew that you wanted to do like throughout your whole life?
Oh, I don't know if I ever really knew it. I mean, I chose medic because um, just kind of influences from the family. My mother was a nurse's aide. My sister was a nurse, and it just kind of seemed like, oh, well, that sounds like a good thing to do. So I became a medic in the Army, and I was fortunate while I was on active duty. I was able to get my EMT certification. So that allowed me to, take the national registry in EMT, and I worked in EMS for years. I was able to get a paramedic license in the state of Oklahoma. Worked in different ambulance services in the state of Oklahoma, but I think it was just kind of a progression along the line, being exposed more and more to the healthcare system, and finding I had kind of a knack for it.
Mhm.
A knack for the knowledge, and also just a knack of being able to, interact with people in no matter no matter how good it was or how big a crisis it was.
Right.
And that's how I kind of got that direction.
Awesome. So let, when were you in the Army? Like in the it was the 80s, right?
Yeah, so I was active duty from 78 to 81.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, you forgot I was that old.
So
Anyway,
that's like immediately post Vietnam, right?
well, yeah, you figure, I think the last draft for Vietnam was either the end of 71. Yeah, the end of 71, I believe, was the end
Okay.
of that.
Okay.
I'm not sure when the fall of Saigon took place. But yeah, I actually joined the Army when I was a junior in high school. My parents had to sign for me. I mean, I knew where I was going after graduation. I
Right.
mean, like you've talked about before personally, I needed to go away from where I was.
Hmm.
I needed to be someplace different. So
Right.
that's what I um, and that was my vehicle to do so.
Yeah,
Join the Army,
absolutely. That
join the
that
Army, see the world.
yeah, that's a great awareness for a 16-year-old to have, and to be able to make that decision and know, you know, that, you know, there's more and that the desire for more. And at that point in your life, you kind of really don't know like what it's going to bring you, but you know that it's going to be new and it's going to be different.
Yeah, I laugh about before I got out. I can remember having the conversation. I said, "Yeah, out of all the tens of thousands of jobs that are out there, I figured out at least I marked one off my list, and being in the Army was one of them. So when it came time for me to be discharged, I was happily discharged and went off active duty."
Yeah, no, I kind of have the same sentiment as well because people all the time people ask me like, um, if I would recommend the military or if it was good for me, and I'm like, yeah, it was absolutely really good for me. I needed it. It changed my life. However, like I think about it too because I would have retired 2 years ago, almost 3 years
Yeah,
ago now if I would have stayed in. But I
right.
remember being almost at the point of getting out, like where I had to decide re-enlist or stay. And I was like, there's not a chance I'm staying here. I'm glad that it did what it did do, but on to the next. I'm out of here.
Yeah, it was one of the next thing. And at that time, for me, that was working in emergency medical services.
Mhm.
I stayed in Oklahoma when I was discharged from the Army. I was at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and I stayed in Oklahoma for a while. Ended up working in Oklahoma City at their ambulance service as a paramedic. Then ended up going down in Apache, Oklahoma, where I just passed a millage tax within the city in order for them to start an ambulance company. And I was the person that they hired to start the ambulance company and get it off the ground. We had
Nice.
volunteer drivers. Stayed there for a couple of years and moved back to West Virginia in '85. Um, I was tired of, I wanted to go home. I guess,
Right.
it's funny how things change between when you're 17, 18, and 25.
Right. Right. So then when you came back to West Virginia, full circle, you experienced the Army, you've seen the world a bit, you've done some things. I bet that was probably like a really good like business experience too as well, like launching like an ambulance service. Not only were you
Oh,
just
sure.
you were one of the facilitators of the service, but you also got to see the business side of it as well.
Right. Cool for all the billing and, all the financials to make sure that the ambulance service not only was able to function from a financial standpoint, but the ambulance service was able to put back money to, to be able so that in the future could procure new equipment, better equipment, replace equipment. So
Right.
it was a good experience.
Okay. Excellent. So then you come back to West Virginia and that's when you go pre-med. Is that correct?
Well, no, so in '85 I got back, and there was a little lull in West Virginia that a lot of people didn't know about, but it had to do with the Vietnam era. And if you had any type of training in a job setting of some type, and the state of West Virginia had a state licenses, in something like that, as a veteran, you could challenge. So I challenged the licensing board to become a licensed practical nurse. So I bought a book on the practical nursing test in the state of West Virginia, and I got my LPN license. And I worked for a nurse for a couple of years, and worked in an outpatient setting, working with a doctor that I met. And then 1987, when I turned 27, I decided if I was ever going to do anything else, now was the time to do it. So I set at intention to go to medical school. I had some friends that I'd worked with before in this world that had went to medical school, and I was kind of the last one of the group that always talked about it or maybe said, "Oh yeah, I could do that someday." Um, and that's what I did. So I visited different colleges in the state of West Virginia, deciding where I was going to do my undergrad. I picked West Liberty in West Liberty, West Virginia, because I like their program. I like their student ratio when you looked at the hard sciences for what the pre-medical classes were in order to get admission into medical school. It fit for me, so that's where I went.
Awesome. So undergrad, pre-med, and which is kind of like almost just like it's just like that's like a funnel, right? It's like a funnel into like the medical field and med school, and then residency, and what comes after that?
Well, the
Fellowship, right?
residency. You do your internship and residency, and then you go on if you into other things if you want to.
Okay, and then you go to medical school. So once you get your undergrad and pre-med, you go do medical school at Marshall, correct?
At Marshall University, yes.
Okay.
I went to Marshall University, and that's where I received my doctorate degree at.
Okay.
And then after Marshall University, I did my family practice residency in West Virginia through West Virginia University.
Okay.
And once I was finished with the residency, my first practice was in South Charleston, in West Virginia.
Okay, excellent. So when you came out to this kind of like is something that I really wanted to connect is, because I have some friends who are just finishing like fellowship and then getting jobs as licensed medical doctors and stuff like that, and they're working for big companies, big hospitals in the area. But you also had like a business background too, where you saw business like from the ground up. Did you immediately from medical school start an independent practice, or did you have to like work for someone else first?
No, my first practice, I actually joined a group practice, and it was another educational experience in lots of things that are wrong with medicine, especially when you talk about, how a practice should be run and how practices are ran. It got to the point to me that probably after about 2 years of being in that practice, I had gotten so frustrated with medicine itself. I took the LSAT and applied to law school. I decided I was going to become the MD, JD, SOB in the room. But I had a friend of mine who had been a nurse before and had previous life experience, who was also a physician. And he came to me and said, "Chuck, you just need to go someplace else, get away, start your own gig, start your own thing, and do it the way you think it ought to be done. And don't let anybody tell you anything else." So that's what I did. So in 2001, I left West Virginia and went to South Carolina, and moved to a little town called Manning, South Carolina, and rented an office and hung up a sign. And over the next 16 years, I carved out a really nice little life for myself. I was solo and I was private, and I did it exactly the way I wanted to do it. And I was able to have a really, really good career out of it in that regard.
I love that, and the thing that I love the most about it is that what a great friend to like keep you from bailing on something that he knew that you would be successful at. Because I can totally understand like the thought and the feeling of that when seeing things just not run the way that you think that they should be run, and just seeing things that could be fraudulent or just not right. And you're like, all right, this whole industry is, you lump a whole like one bad experience with everything, right? But you were able to pivot, get some entrepreneurship under your belt and be your own master by opening your own practice and being able to run things the way you saw fit.
Yeah, and I ran everything. I did my own billing. I did my own posting. I didn't hire out anything. I've always had a problem with the myth of the expert. I've always kind of figured if it was written down in a book, there's not a lot of stuff that I can't figure out, or at least read and figure out. So when there was me, there was a girl that answered the phone and did my appointments, and there was a girl in the back that helped me with patients as far as bringing patients in and out of the room. Besides that, I did everything else. I did everything else. I was my own accountant. I was the guy. I was the guy. Uh,
A one
but I
man
was
show.
okay with that, because if it was going to fail, it was going to fail because of me, not because of somebody else.
Hmm.
And I was okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. That is really putting, I think this does a couple things. Is first of all, just like putting a lot of trust and confidence in yourself. But second of all, putting a lot of, you know, well, it's gotta be me,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of motivation.
Well, sure, you've gone into business for yourself. You don't have anybody to turn to.
Right.
You're the person that's got to show up.
Yep.
Even on the days that you don't want to show up,
Hmm.
you're the person that has to show up.
Yep.
So
Absolutely. So that's some things that I kind of wanted to ask about as well. Um, so this is standard medical practice, family doctor stuff. But then
right.
you kind of you dabbled and you did some acupuncture and some more holistic stuff too. What kind of like sparked your interest in that? Was it a failure that you saw like on like established medical system that like wanted to branch off and just do things a little bit differently? How did that? What led to
Well,
that?
I think there were lots of reasons, and probably the biggest, the main driving factors is that uh, being solo and being private, um, it became obvious to me, and this is just my personal opinion and my personal, you know, uh, assessment of what I went through. It became obvious to me that hospital administrations didn't like me, insurance companies didn't like me, and the regulatory within the government didn't like me. They want to be holding. They wanted people to be employees. They
Mhm.
wanted people to do what they were told to do when they were told to do it in the manner they were told to do it.
Mhm.
And they, in a lot of ways, I felt like they took what I had created, had built for myself, and said, no, we're not going to let you do this anymore. So at that point, I decided I'm going to have to do something else. So I had always been someone who was, understanding the difference between a poison and a medication is really just the intention of somebody who the person that's giving it. And I'd
Mhm.
always approached, you know, uh, my practice that way, and how I dealt with patients and how I treated patients. So the integrative medicine fellowship seemed like a really good fit, because its whole, or the main um, body of that work was, how do we integrate into our Western allopathic medicine system those more Eastern medical systems? I mean, like Ayurvedic medicine's been around for 5,000 years. You can't say it's all good. You can't look at that body of work over 5,000 years and say none of it's any good. And at the same time, you can't look at it and say it's all good. So differentiate what's good and what choose that, from all these different modalities of, people heal and helping people get better. And that's what the integrative medicine fellowship was all about. So it was good. I mean, I don't know if I'd ever told you this. We would actually take people that we'd get their food budget, about what they could spend on food a day, and we would take them shopping in the grocery store. And you'd be locked into their budget about what they could spend on food, and then trying to help them learn how to make healthy choice options, and make good decisions. Because these were people that wanted a healthier lifestyle, or maybe they had some other chronic underlying condition that really push them. In order to treat this completely, you need to look at what your, as far as what your food intake is. Um, you know, but teaching them to be able to how to shop, that was always the coolest thing.
Yeah, and that's something that I think everyone in America could use
Oh,
nowadays.
absolutely.
Like that's a course that should be taught in public school, maybe they should contract that out, and because most of the teachers need that course as well.
Well, I don't know how, I don't know how medical school education has changed, since I was a medical student. But, there wasn't a lot of nutrition stuff taught.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a lot of nutrition stuff. There's so much other things that you have to learn from a didactic standpoint, just so you're capable of being able to set and pass for the medical licensing exam.
Mm-hmm.
And, out of the whole exam that you take over a 3-year period, you take 3 different settings, 2 days a setting. So 6 days worth of testing, you might run across 3 or 4 questions that have something to do with nutrition. So it's not like a large body of information that you spend a lot of time on.
Right. So do you think that they're dropping the ball on that, or is that just like something that they don't focus on because it would not benefit financially for like the medical establishment, or what do you think? Why do you think they neglect that so much? Since
Well, I think
if it's like so
I think
important.
Well, I think some of it is just simply, it's just, the establishment of how we educate people in this country, how to become physicians. I mean, how long can someone stay in didactic classes? Because the first 2 years of medical school, I mean, you're carrying 800 level college classes, and you're carrying 20 plus hours, 24 hours. I mean, the body of work is just unbelievable. I think about medical school to this day, and I get sick in my stomach.
Right.
It was hard. I lose my signal.
We good?
Oh. We good now?
Yeah. No, I heard you though. You were talking.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was on our end.
Yeah. So I guess my point is I don't know where you'd fit much more.
Right.
I really don't.
Yeah.
I don't know where you fit much more.
Yeah.
I think probably residency programs have incorporated more emphasis on those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
But probably medical school's not. I don't know. I don't know what has changed in the last year since I
not
27, 30 years since I graduated from medical school.
Right. Probably not a whole lot because, over the last, 3 years that I've been running my business, whether it be online or in person, I've had, more than a handful of licensed medical doctors seeking my expertise on nutrition.
Sure.
And so
absolutely.
So, that makes me feel good. But also it makes me be like, oh, that's interesting. Like, because, before that happened, before I opened my business and I was having that type of clientele, come to me, I never knew the disconnect between the two.
Yeah.
I thought it would be part of it.
You would think that. You would think that. Yeah. It was a big part. It was a big part of the integrated medicine fellowship.
Right.
And it's like, and even at that point, I think, wow, how come I didn't learn this earlier?
Right. But you made a really great point there too. It's just like, and this goes back to what I've seen firsthand with the folks that I've worked with firsthand that have been either, in fellowship and residency for, or in medical school, that their workload is just like astronomically exhausting.
Oh, it is. I mean, I can remember tests having 400 pages, double-sided pages of typed notes to study for an exam. And there might be 60 questions on it. The difference between failing and graduating someday with an MD or not failing and graduating with an MD, or failing and not graduating was, a matter of 3 or 4 questions. Yeah, but it is a pressure cooker beyond belief.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh,
So that kind of goes back to, I want to ask this as well, like when we're talking about the happiness of pursuit, and what was the other one that you used first that Wayne Dyer says?
it's about it's striving, not arriving.
Striving, not arriving. So the striving of medical school is that, you say you still think about it to this day and get sick to your stomach. Is there any part of it that's like nostalgic that you're like, that like brings back like feelings that you're like, oh man, I'm glad I did that?
Ooh. I'll tell you what I've said. When I got out of medical school, I was $185,000 in debt, and certainly that number's probably doubled for people that are getting out of medical school now.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back on all that time, and I think, man, if I'd have opened a Taco Bell all those years ago for $180,000, and here 30 years later, I'd probably own 15 Taco Bells.
Yeah.
It might have been a better deal. Might have been a
Right.
better deal. I don't know. It's kind of hard to try to judge it because uh, as with yourself, I think probably for me, I've kind of reinvented myself at least every decade into another iteration of who I am. So that person that person that accomplish that work, and I mean, and actually live through that. And trust me, I don't know how they did it sometimes, but uh, he's a distant memory.
Yeah. Man, that's a really great point. Just the evolution of self and the evolution of person. And,
Yeah.
you know, there's one more thing I wanted to ask you about, like the medical thing,
Okay.
before we move on, because I want to talk about your entrepreneurship endeavors, as far as like, even I know that you owned restaurants in the past,
Mhm.
and your new endeavor with Destination Cigars. But you hear a lot of times, I don't know if I've heard lawyers talk about this, or just business people, but or even doctors saying that doctors are good doctors, but they're not good business people, and that's why they need like a team of other people. And I feel like you had a really good balance of both of those. Would you say that? And would you say that that's a true statement?
Absolutely, I would say that I was not the norm, because I would have other physicians come to me, and in particularly, I remember this guy who was in town, and he was an internal medicine doctor, and he comes to me, he says, I'm seeing 60, 70 patients a day, and da da da. It's like I'm working all the time. He goes, and I made $65,000 last year. He's like, what am I doing wrong? And I'm like, well, bring me your books. And, I sat down, I looked at his books, and I looked at his billing and his charges and just the organization of everything. And he's like, how can I fix this? And I'm like, there's only one way to fix this. Find someplace else that you want to practice medicine, shut this down, and go someplace else, and do not do this same thing again. Because what he had done wrong was everything. I mean,
Mm,
everything. Um, once you open Pandora's box on some of those things, you cannot, or you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't put the monster back in the box. And that was my advice to him, was to shut it down and go someplace else and not make the same mistakes. And I gave him, these are the things that you cannot do. You can't allow your practice to become so, all your friends. You can't get everybody that you like a job. I'm sorry. I mean, you can, because somebody's got to pay for that.
right.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I tried to maintain at least 10% of my practice as charity. Uh, People that didn't qualify for any type of assistance, and I knew not to bill them, so I never charged them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think healthcare would be a lot better if everybody did that.
Mm-hmm.
That was my decision, but not everybody makes those types of decisions, and
Mm-hmm.
not everybody can make those types of decisions
Right.
because they are under such overwhelming financial obligation, uh, and it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot too. Is like, just like, you know, especially with family practice and stuff like that, it becomes more of a numbers game at times than a helping game at times, and that's a big reason why, you know, there's a lot of frustration.
Yeah. Well, for me, I did my private practice differently. My private practice was as much for me as it was my patients,
Mm-hmm.
because I did other things. I only saw patients a half day a week, so I never overloaded myself with. And then I had other jobs. I ended up being a medical director in 3 different nursing facilities. Actually, was the director of the long-term care division for Clarendon Health Systems, and that was a major part of my practice. So that allowed me to really see people in the office the way I wanted to be able to see people in the
Mm-hmm.
office. That was, if they needed 20 minutes, they got 20 minutes. If they needed an hour, they got an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I always had the flexibility within my schedule to be able to practice medicine that way. And that was important to me. Because for the most part in family medicine, 80% of it, 85% of it, it's really pretty easy medicine. It's written down in a book. Learn the book. It's cooked. It's not anything. It's not the rare diseases that you read about.
Mm-hmm.
In medical school, they always tell you if you're standing next to a barn and you hear hooves, you think horses, not zebras. So you always look out for horses. You don't think you're going to see a zebra coming
Mm-hmm.
around the barn. And a lot of medicine is kind of like that. And what you find out, or at least what I found out over time after years of practice, is that really a lot of people's problems had more to do with their mindset and their attitude. It wasn't really the fact that they had high blood pressure. I mean, that's easy to treat. You just make sure they don't have underlying cardiovascular disease. I mean, there's things that you do, and all that's really easy. But even when I was in my 40s practicing that way, I was always amazed at people that were in their 60s and 70s, and they would want to talk about their issues that they had with their moms and dads that had been gone for years. It's kind of like, how do you help people navigate through those traumas, because it still had a major effect on their life and how they dealt with themselves and how they thought about themselves and how they dealt with everything. So a lot of what I did was really just being there for people, to be the sounding board, to be a sounding board, to be able to validate their feelings and not tell them that they're wrong, and tell them it was okay to feel that way, but it was not healthy for them to continue to feel that way.
Right.
They needed to come into a better relationship with those experiences in the past. Because we've all had those things, and we've all, any of those events we have in our lives that we view as either bad or unhealthy for us. Even after you work through all those events, you still carry them around as a memory. And like I said, my memory of medical school, and it just kind of makes me sick at my stomach a little bit. See, it doesn't affect me on a daily basis now, but still that memory triggers something in me. So our memories have the ability to trigger responses, and learning how to regulate those responses, and so that it doesn't have an overall impact on your health. It's important because those things impact your health as well.
Learning how to make the choice to just respond to it better.
Oh, absolutely. You respond, don't react. I mean, how many times I've found myself in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people doing the wrong thing because of reactions instead of responses. You can always take that 1 second pause, to say, well, how, can you run that through your head? How do I want to respond to this? Because I know how I want to react. And sometimes that's not good.
Yeah. And sometimes that just takes doing the wrong thing enough times to know to not do that again.
Well, that's true.
And just to take a second,
You find yourself in those situations, and you start connecting the dots and saying, well, gee, what's the common denominator here? Oh, me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing that anytime anything bad's happened to in your life, 100% of the times you are involved.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's sort of how I got into the integrative medicine.
Cool.
Really,
Cool.
I saw that what I was currently doing was I was not going to be able to continue to do. So I needed to find a different avenue and try to do things differently,
Okay.
and ended up becoming essentially employed after I finished the integrative medicine fellowship. I did Kiko style acupuncture, uh, which is essentially Japanese acupuncture. And that kind of led me around to ending my career in pain management, which was just as difficult as doing family practice on a whole different scale.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so the acupuncture ended the pain management? Is that what you said?
Well, no, that's what, after I finished the acupunctures, that's what kind of pushed me into the pain management world.
Okay.
Because once again, I had something else in my toolbox. I had the family practice toolbox, I had the integrative medicine toolbox, and then now I had the acupuncture toolbox. And so it kind of made me an unusual person,
Right.
because I had different things,
Right.
the old adage, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right.
Rings true in medicine.
Yeah.
I had more than a hammer, so I ended up in pain management.
And in this time as well, you're also pursuing like entrepreneurial endeavors, right? Was this like, you owned a restaurant at a time, right?
Yeah. Before I left Manning, at some point, one of the guys I played golf with on every Wednesday, his name was Johnny Michaud. I love Johnny Michaud. He had a bar and a restaurant, and we'd play golf on Wednesdays and Wednesday afternoons, or that would be the 19th hole for all the guys that played in our group of golf. And Johnny had he'd been in the restaurant business for years, and one day he just kind of made the statement. He was telling me, Chuck, there's some days I come here and I sit outside, and it's all I can do to get out of the car to walk inside. I just can't take it anymore, because I think I'm going to have to sell it. And I made one of those reactions instead of a response. I said, well, Johnny, I'll buy it. And I have a tendency that sometimes when I let things out of my mouth, I can't back up from them. I don't care how much I want to back up from them. I just won't do it. And so I ended up owning a bar and a restaurant at the same time that I'm operating a medical practice, and was a medical director at 3 nursing homes. And I was burning the candle on both ends and had a blowtorch in the middle.
Right. Talk about a well-rounded individual, but also a full plate.
It was a very hard time in my life. But of course, I was not married. I mean, so the only one that I was really hurting, the only person I was really, hurting was me. I guess that's the only plus side to it.
Makes it easier for suffering.
Yeah. I got to suffer by myself. I didn't make other people suffer around me as much as I've had, a whole family that was having to deal with my craziness at the same time.
What are some of the biggest lessons you learned, like within that time and within that ownership, bar, restaurant ownership?
Wow. I considered that a light speed MBA. I really do. I had to learn so much so quickly. I mean, and I'd never been in the restaurant business, man. I checked out every book that you could find in the library and did everything to consume it. And then it was just trial by fire. And it ended up, I look at that point, how you look back on some things, I look at that point as the worst babysitting job I ever had in my life, because that's exactly what it felt like, and it was not in an area where I could have a revolving door of employees, because, so I had limited resources as far as who was available to work, as far as waiters and waitresses and bartenders and cooks. It's not like you're in a big college town where, everybody's always looking for a job. So it was tough. It was tough. And it was time consuming, and it was not a very good time in my life. I I became to the point where I can remember when I first opened the restaurant, I wouldn't, I'd show up for dinner service because I had to be there. We were only open for dinner service, and I wouldn't eat as much. I wouldn't have a drink until we were done with dinner service, and I might have a beer at the end of the evening, before I closed the place. That probably lasted about 3 weeks, and then before you know it, I was the first person at the bar, and then, and I would check on things, and then before you know it, I'd be the first person at the bar, and then I'd be the first person to have the second drink at the bar. And then before you know it, you're spending more time at the bar than you are watching. It is not conducive to a very good lifestyle.
Right. Yeah, no, I can totally get that.
I got rid of that business when I had friends one of my best friends, his wife came to me and said, Chuck, we don't know who you are anymore. And that was kind of a wake-up call that said, maybe I need to stop this, and maybe I need to do something different.
Right. Well, that's good to have good friends like that.
It was great. It was what I learned probably in the medical practices, and more than anything, and I may have even talked to you about, it's not about what you bring in the front door. It's about how much you allow to leak out the back.
Right.
It's not about because you can in certain industries and certain things you do especially when you're talking about things that are one-on-one time, like being a physician where everything is face to face and that's what you bill for. There's only so much face time that you can give. So it's not about how much that amount that you can bring in the door. At least for me, was a very set limit, because I was not going to be one of these people that stuck my room in the exam head, stuck my head through the door in the room, make eye contact, say a few words, and I looked at your labs, everything looks great. It looks like your medicine's working, it's fine. If you have any problems, tell Judy or whomever, or give us a call, and we'll see you in 6 months, and turn around and walk out. That's not how I practice medicine, and I just wasn't willing to do that. So, it was all about how could I control what it cost to be in the practice of medicine, and that was a really good lesson, for me in a lot of ways.
Right. So, you've been on this medicine journey with multiple medical practices. You've been on an entrepreneurial journey with multiple different types of businesses as well, and now you're on a new one.
Yes.
With Destination Cigars.
Destination Cigars, yes. Destination Cigars. We opened up the first location in Sevierville on August 22nd, and opened the second location in Beckley, West Virginia on August the 29th.
And Sevierville is in Tennessee.
Yeah, Sevierville, Tennessee. Yes, that's where we were living. Your mother and I, that's where we've been living for the last 5 years. And of course, we went to West Virginia for about 1.5 years because of your nephew, and then we tried to help out to facilitate his wants to go to a different high school, and facilitate us being there until his mother and father could be there, so that they could be in the location, so he could be in the right school district, so that he could finish up his senior year. And during that time, I met some really amazing guys who'd been in the cigar industry for years, and then one of them a blender, Jay Raudebush, one of my partners. He's been blending for a decade or more, and he's been in the industry for 20 years, and just a really interesting guy. And he had been in the retail business before and was out of it. And he and I become friends. And I just asked him one evening while I was sitting in the cigar lounge, and I said, "Would you do it again?" He said, "Absolutely." I said, "Man, I know where there's a place where we can open up a cigar store," because I had lived here for 5 years, and I knew there was not what I would consider a local cigar store and lounge in the area. And so within a couple of weeks, we had a corporation, we had a business plan, we had a third partner, and then one of my best friends, Mark Saber. And then within probably a month from that time frame, we added a fourth member, Sam Cook, who's a retired attorney, who's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and he answers all the important questions. It's just a great group of guys, and it seems, I know some people think it's kind of odd. Here I am, a physician for 30 years, and I own a cigar store, but you know, yeah, I'm a physician and I own a cigar store. This
That's
is what it
awesome.
is.
And it's going
Yeah.
well. And you guys, it was fun. You sent me some pictures earlier of just like, some of the places in Nicaragua where you guys are getting your product, and you guys have your own specific brand as well.
Yes, we have two cigar companies. One of them is Destino Cigar Company, and the other one is West Portillas Cigar Company, which originated in West Virginia. It's West Portillas for West by God, Virginia. But we manufacture in Esteli, Nicaragua, and Condega, Nicaragua. Jay just got back from, actually, Jay and Sam both just got back from Nicaragua. We go down every 2 months, put in our orders for our next cigars that need to be produced to keep up with our current sales. And Jay, while he was down there, also blended a new cigar that's going to be coming out here probably within the next 2 months that will help complete our Destino line of cigars.
That's amazing.
As far as what our offerings are. But yeah, the more I learned about the industry itself, it was just when the more you know about it, cigar manufacturing, when you're talking a long leaf hand rolled premium cigars, it may be one of the truly last absolute handmade products left in the world that's sold on a mass scale. The amount of labor that goes into it is just amazing. They estimate that 300 hands touch a cigar before it ever gets to the consumer. That's how many people are involved with it.
Wow.
In Nicaragua, when it rains, they'll send armies of people out into the fields with towels to dry the leaves so that the sun doesn't come out and cause spots on the leaves. It's just a really interesting industry, and it also has the benefit. I like the idea that our company, we employ people in Nicaragua, because those people need jobs too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're nice people, so we like that. We like that we're able to have an impact on a different part of the world in a positive manner.
That's probably one of my favorite parts about it as well. Like, now that you think about it, just like the how you can touch people that way, and not just like, touching them by providing them opportunity, which is great.
Yeah. So it's been an interesting. It was an interesting startup. There was lots of hurdles to get through. But we were able to get through them, and now we're open. Things are going good, and we seem to be growing on a month. We grow on a daily basis. Actually, it seems like,
and there's plans for expansion as well.
There's plans for expansion. Yes, there are always plans for expansion.
Well,
because why would you set your goals low and reach them?
Exactly right.
You'd rather set them high, and I fell short this time.
That gives a lot more time to enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So we'll have
we'll
have to talk about that in person further on down the line when it's continued to grow, and we'll reference back on this first conversation and see how it's gone from then.
Okay, sounds great.
But before we go, I think we got about 7 minutes left. We got about 7 minutes left. I want to highlight you, and I want to highlight your health journey and your weight loss journey, because I think that
yes,
that's what you've been able to accomplish with that is incredible. It's not just incredible because of like the sheer difficulty that it is to lose 135 pounds. Is that how much it is? About 135?
Yeah, it varies, 135 plus, someplace in that ballpark. It's somewhere in there.
Not only have you dropped 135 pounds consistently over time, but you started it after you were already 60, in your 60s.
Yes.
So that to me is a story that you can show anyone and be like, you can do it too. If you were able to do this, lifestyle change, lifestyle transformation, and completely change your health and your life, then, I mean, especially people who are in the younger people should have no excuse at all.
Well, um, with that being said, part of my journey involved actual proper treatment
Mhm.
of my metabolic disorder, because I had been tagged as a dysmetabolic syndrome X person for well over a decade. There's lots of terms that's used for that. People that have carbohydrate sensitivity, dysmetabolic syndrome X, insulin insensitivity, type 2 diabetes. It's all on a spectrum. It's all on a spectrum.
Mhm.
And during my own treatment of that, simply because I was who I am, um, everything that they'd want to give me from a medication standpoint, um, I was not willing to take.
Mhm.
It's, I'm not saying it's what everyone should do. It was just the decision for me. So for years, I had been calorically restricted for a long time. And I had got to the point where I could restrict between 600, 800 calories a day. And I was still carrying in excess of 300 pounds. And that just had to do with the fact that I had untreated, you know, just untreated metabolic disorder. Um, with the advent of GPL-1s, um, looking at the data from that, it made sense. It made sense how that medication worked and how it could possibly help me. Um, I'm not saying it did what it did and I just changed, but it was a tool that allowed me to. It was a tool that allowed me to change, and that's how I used it.
Right.
Not everyone, not everyone gets the kind of results that I get, but I don't think everyone uses the tool with the intention and the commitment that I used it with.
Mm,
Uh,
that's the thing too, right? You can give a tool to anyone, but unless they use the tool in the correct manner, then
Absolutely.
you're not going to build a home, or
Yeah, yeah.
y-
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, you can't dump a bunch of lumber out in front of a of a building site somewhere and throw some tools on it and say, "Okay,
yeah,
next week I expect a house."
yeah,
No,
exactly.
it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And now, did it make some things easier? Oh, absolutely, absolutely, because it changed just simply the way the GLP-1 works. It works specifically on ghrelin and leptin that's released by what's called the vagal afferent neurons in your gut, and those have a direct effect on the satiety center inside your brain. Those receptor sites are also found in your taste buds. So, in you from a physiological standpoint, break the habitual standpoint of, well, I'm going to eat this bad stuff or something that I know is bad for me. I may have restricted my calories, but it doesn't mean I ate good food. I mean, I
Right.
still ate bad food. So it helped me break that cycle,
Okay.
and that was probably one of the most important things that happened, just breaking the bad cycle of being addicted to bad food.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. A lot of us, I think, is probably one of the most important. It's not about all about numbers. It's about quality of the numbers you're putting in, because you can put in
Right.
500 calories of a Snicker bar, or you can put 500 calories of grass-fed ground beef, and they're going to do two completely different things to you. Um,
Absolutely.
but
Absolutely.
that's amazing that you were able to utilize that tool and use it to your benefit and have massive success from it.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to have to expand on that. But we're out of time. We've been on here for an hour already.
Oh, that's great. I've enjoyed it. It went
Yeah.
by fast.
Yeah, no, it goes by really fast. Every time we sit down and have a chat, it goes by fast. So we could probably
Yeah.
do 2 or 3 hours of this. But again, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for sitting down with me. Thanks for telling us your story. Thank you for telling us just bringing so much value and just like kind of just walking us through like everything that you've done because you've done so many great things and you've accomplished so much. And I'm excited to see where Destination Cigars goes and your continued journey with your health and everything. And we'll have to get you back out here and sitting in that chair across from me here at the beginning of next year.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Awesome. Thanks again. And I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you. Let me know how you feel about each and every episode. When you like them, the things that you feel brought you value, comment. Leave me comments. Leave me feedback. Share these episodes if you like them. Remember, subscribe, follow, and keep coming back. We'll see you next week.